I have come to take over the territory.
The village of Ochu was in chaos. One by one, the beautiful maidens began dying, each found with a strange mark on her neck. Mothers wailed, fathers raged, and the air was thick with fear and sorrow. The elders prayed, sacrifices were offered, but nothing stopped the deaths. Panic spread like wildfire, and whispers of a curse filled every home. The villagers were desperate, terrified, and searching for answers that seemed impossible to find. They say a village that has never tasted fear laughs louder than the rest of the world, and Ochu laughed freely. It was a place where mornings broke gently with the crowing of roosters and evenings ended with shared meals under open skies. The land was fertile, the river faithful, and the people content. Children ran barefoot without worry. Elders sat beneath ancient Iroko trees telling stories of long ago, and the air itself seemed to carry peace like a promise. Ochu was known for its beauty, but more than that, it was known for its harmony. The maidens were admired far beyond the village borders, young women, whose beauty was not just in their faces but in their grace, their laughter, and the warmth of their hearts. The young men were strong and ambitious, proud farmers and hunters who dreamed of building homes and families within the same land that raised them. Life in Ochu followed a rhythm so predictable that danger felt like a foreign word, something that belonged to distant places and cruel tales told only to warn children at night. That rhythm faltered on a quiet evening when the sun hung low and painted the sky in shades of gold and red. A lone figure appeared on the narrow path leading into the village. At first, people thought he was a traitor who had lost his way, but as he drew closer, conversation slowed and eyes followed him. He was tall, taller than most men in Ochu, and his skin was dark and smooth, glowing faintly under the dying sun. His shoulders were broad, his posture calm, and his beard was carefully arranged, framing a face so striking that it commanded attention without effort. Yet it was his eyes that disarmed the villagers most. They were soft, almost childlike, filled with an innocence that made suspicion feel shameful. He carried no weapon, no bag heavy with secrets. When he reached the village square, he stopped, bowed his head deeply before the elders, and knelt respectfully before elderly women, greeting them one after the other with humility that felt genuine. His voice was gentle as he spoke, explaining that he was searching for refuge, that the road behind him had been unkind, and that all he desired was a place to rest and begin again. The elders looked at one another, and in that moment, Ochu made a decision that would change his destiny forever. They welcomed him. They gave him a small hut at the edge of the village, close enough to be part of the community, yet far enough to grant privacy. They called him Orji, and the name spread quickly, carried on curious tongues and excited whispers. Before the night ended, food appeared at his doorstep, bowls of soup rich with palm oil, neatly wrapped pounded yam, and calabashes of fresh water drawn from the stream. The maidens came shyly at first, some pretending they were sent by their mothers, others claiming they were only passing by. They smiled more when Orji spoke, laughed more when he laughed, and lingered longer than necessary just to hear his voice. Within days, admiration for the stranger grew into fascination. The elders praised his manners, noting how respectfully he greeted everyone. The elderly women spoke of his kindness, how he always bowed and listened attentively. But among the young men, something darker stirred. They watched how the maidens gathered around Orji, how laughter followed him like a shadow, and how eyes once meant for them now lingered elsewhere. Jealousy crept quietly into their hearts, though none dared speak it aloud. After all, what crime was beauty, and what fault lay in a man who seemed so harmless? When night fell and Ochu slept, Orji did not always rest. Under the pale glow of the moon, he walked. He moved through the village slowly, carefully, as though memorizing it. He traced the paths between huts, noted which doors creaked and which stayed silent, listened to the way the wind moved through certain compounds, and counted the distance between the river and the shrine. Sometimes he stopped and stood still for long moments, eyes lifted as if listening to something no one else could hear. Before dawn, he returned to his hut, his presence unnoticed, his actions unquestioned. Ochu slept peacefully, unaware that while it had opened its arms to a stranger, that stranger had begun to study its heartbeat. In a village where trust was given freely, no one imagined that danger could arrive bowing its head and smiling softly. And so, under the same moon that had watched generations live and die in peace, something ancient and patient settled into Ochu, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The first death in Ochu did not arrive with thunder or screams. It came quietly, almost politely, as though afraid to disturb the peace it was about to destroy. It was a market morning when the news spread that a young maiden had been found lifeless in her hut. She lay as if asleep, her face calm, her wrapper neatly drawn around her body. There were no wounds anyone could point to, no blood spilled to announce violence. The women gathered, wailing softly while the men stood back in confused silence. The elders spoke in hushed tones, reminding everyone that death sometimes chose without reason, that even the healthiest could be called suddenly by the ancestors. The maiden was buried with full rites, tears soaking the earth, and Ochu tried to return to its rhythm. For a few days, laughter returned cautiously, like a guest unsure of welcome. But then another maiden died. This one collapsed while fetching water, her body discovered near the stream. Again, there were no obvious signs of struggle, no enemy seen fleeing into the bush. Fear crept in quietly, like smoke through cracks in a wall. Mothers began to call their daughters indoors earlier than usual. Maidens who once walked freely in groups now held each other's hands tightly, glancing over their shoulders. Still, the elders insisted it was coincidence, that panic would only invite misfortune. But coincidence turned into pattern when a third maiden died, then a fourth. With each burial, the air in Ochu grew heavier, grief piling upon grief, until even the strongest hearts began to tremble. As the deaths multiplied, Ochu changed. Night no longer brought songs and moonlit stories. It brought silence broken only by prayers whispered behind closed doors. The village priest declared that the gods must be displeased, that perhaps an old taboo had been broken or an ancestral promise forgotten. Sacrifices were prescribed, goats with unblemished coats, fowls offered at dawn, libations poured until the earth drank deeply. The people complied desperately, clinging to faith as their last defense against the unknown. Smoke from ritual fires curled into the sky, carrying prayers heavy with fear. Yet the gods did not answer. Another maiden died shortly after the sacrifices, her body found at the edge of a farm, eyes staring at nothing. That was when whispers began to turn dangerous. Some said a curse had been placed on Ochu by jealous neighbors. Others claimed an angry spirit walked the land at night, feeding on youth and beauty. Suspicion spread like wildfire, jumping from household to household, turning neighbors into strangers. Even Orji, the handsome stranger once adored by all, felt the shift. Maidens still smiled at him, but their smiles were forced now, shadowed by fear. The young men watched him more closely, their jealousy sharpening into something else unease. Still, no one dared accuse him. He was gentle, respectful, always present at gatherings, always offering condolences when another family mourned. How could such a man be linked to death? Then Uju died and the village broke. Uju was not just another maiden, she was promise itself. Betrothed to Ikenna, she embodied the future many parents dreamed of for their daughters, a good marriage, a strong household, children who would carry on the family name. On the morning her body was found in the village square, the sun seemed to rise reluctantly, as if unwilling to witness the grief that followed. Women screamed openly, men beat their chests, and elders wept without shame. Ikenna arrived like a storm, pushing through the crowd, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear the cries around him. When he saw Uju, something inside him shattered beyond repair. Yet even in his devastation, his hunter's instinct remained alive. As others prepared her body for burial, Ikenna knelt beside her and looked closely, refusing to let grief blind him. That was when he saw it, a deep, unnatural mark on her neck. Not the mark of rope, not the cut of a blade. It was precise, almost deliberate, as though something sharp and alive had struck her once and withdrawn. The sight burned itself into his mind. He said nothing then, but anger ignited within him, hotter than any fire he had ever known. 2 days after Uju's burial, another maiden was found dead along a bush path leading back into the village. By then, fear had stripped Ochu of all pretenses. Ikenna ran to the scene before the elders could arrive. When he saw the body and found the same mark on her neck, his doubts vanished completely. This was no curse of the gods, no wandering spirit. This was murder, calculated, repeated, and hidden in plain sight. The killer knew the village, knew its rhythms, knew how to strike without being seen. As the crowd gathered and panic swelled, Ikenna stood silently, his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning faces. In that moment, he made a vow that would change everything. He would uncover the truth, even if it meant leaving Ochu behind, even if it meant facing horrors the village had never imagined. While others prayed louder and offered more sacrifices, Ikenna chose a different path, the path of answers. And somewhere in the village, beneath the same peaceful smile he had worn since his arrival, Orji listened, patient and unseen, as fear tightened its grip on Ochu. Ikenna could not sleep that night. The village of Ochu was quiet, but to him, every sound was amplified. The whisper of the wind, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an animal he couldn't see. He sat under the ancient Iroko tree in the middle of the village, the same tree where elders once told stories of courage and bravery. But tonight, there were no stories, only silence and grief heavy enough to crush a man. His mind kept returning to the mark on Uju's neck. It was too deliberate, too clean to be the work of an accident or natural death. It was precise, purposeful, and it filled him with a cold rage he could not name. He thought of the other maidens, their smiles, their innocence, how they had trusted the village and everyone in it, and how that trust had been used against them. He realized something the elders refused to see. The deaths were no curse of the gods. They were no accident. They were planned, executed with patience and skill, and the killer was hiding in plain sight. By dawn, Ikenna had made a decision. He could not wait. He could not sit in Ochu hoping the truth would reveal itself. He would leave the village to find answers, even if it meant walking into danger alone. With a small bundle of food, water, and his hunting knife, he stepped quietly out of the village, careful not to alarm anyone. He moved through forests where the trees were so dense that sunlight barely touched the ground. He crossed rivers whose waters whispered warnings. And he entered villages where knowledge was guarded like gold. In one such village, he met an old man whose eyes seemed older than time. Ikenna spoke carefully, recounting the pattern of deaths, the mark on the maidens' necks, and the stranger who had come to Ochu. The old man fell silent for a long while, then finally spoke. "You are speaking of a predator that wears the face of man," he said, his voice shaking. "A creature that cannot kill with force, only by seduction, by trust, by patience. It studies the village, its people, their routines, before it chooses its prey. It waits. It watches. And it is already inside your village." Ikenna's heart sank. The old man's words confirmed what he had feared. But he needed more. He traveled farther, determined to find the truth. His journey led him to a secluded settlement where a woman known to see beyond the ordinary lived in quiet isolation. She listened to him patiently, her eyes far away, as if watching what he could not. When he finished, she nodded. "The man you speak of is no man," she said. "He is ancient, patient, and cursed. He cannot force his victims. He can only strike when he is welcomed, when desire blinds reason, when trust silences instinct. At the moment of intimacy, he enchants his right hand, and one of his fingers becomes a serpent. It strikes the maiden's neck before she can react. Death is quiet, swift, invisible to all but those who watch closely." Ikenna felt his stomach turn. The woman continued, "No ordinary weapon can harm him. No man can stop him. No elder can see him for what he is. Only a maiden, brave and pure, can confront him and survive. Here," she said, handing him a small calabash filled with a thick, dark substance. "This will reveal him. It must be used at the exact moment he shows his true form. Too early and it will fail. Too late and another life will be lost. Choose carefully who carries this burden, for courage alone is not enough." Armed with this knowledge, Ikenna returned to Ochu. The village looked smaller, quieter, changed. Fear had silenced it. Children peeked from behind doorways. Women moved quickly, clutching each other. Men stared at shadows, suspicion shadowing their eyes. Ikenna did not go to the elders. He went directly to the one person he trusted most, his sister Ada. He told her everything, the deaths, the pattern, the journey, the seer's words, and the truth about the stranger they had welcomed. Ada listened, her face pale, but her eyes steady. When Ikenna handed her the calabash, explaining what must be done, silence fell heavy between them. Ada understood immediately. She would have to face the monster, a creature hidden behind the face of a man. She would have to walk willingly into the mouth of death. And Ikenna? He could only wait, knowing that the village's fate rested on her courage. Outside, the night seemed darker than ever, the air heavy with anticipation, as if Ochu itself knew that the evil it had welcomed was about to meet the bravery it had underestimated. Somewhere nearby, Orji slept quietly, unaware that his patience had a limit, and that the moment of reckoning had arrived. The village of Ochu was unusually quiet that night. Even the crickets seemed to have hushed themselves, as if they knew what was about to happen. Ada moved carefully, her heart pounding in her chest. The small calabash in her hand felt heavier than any weight she had ever carried. She approached the stranger's hut at the edge of the village, the same hut where Orji had spent countless nights luring the maidens. The moon cast long shadows, and every sound, the snap of a twig, the flutter of a leaf, made her flinch. She stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath. The village's fate rested on her courage, and she could not afford to fail. Inside the hut, Orji sat calmly, as if he sensed nothing, preparing for his nightly ritual. His smile, so gentle and innocent, had deceived the entire village, but Ada now knew the truth. She crouched, watching, waiting for the precise moment. She could feel her hands trembling, but she steadied them. The moment had to be perfect. Inside, Orji's charm worked as it always had. A young maiden, drawn by his smile and the feeling of safety in the village, had approached him. He spoke softly, laughed lightly, and leaned closer, his right hand subtly moving as if preparing some secret spell. Ada's breath caught. She saw the first sign, the unnatural shift of his finger, the way his thumb finger started curling, twisting into a shape that should not exist. The serpent. This was the moment. Holding the calabash tightly, she stepped forward with determination and courage she didn't know she possessed. Her voice rang out, sharp and steady, startling the maiden and Orji alike. Without hesitation, she threw the thick, dark substance onto him. It hissed and sizzled as it touched his skin, curling like smoke and fire, wrapping around him in a living, writhing blanket. Orji screamed, a sound that was both human and something else entirely, piercing the night. The villagers began to gather at a distance, drawn by the noise, unable to believe the scene unfolding before their eyes. Orji writhed violently, his body twisting, breaking, changing. His calm, handsome face contorted with fury and pain as the transformation took hold. The serpent finger, which had claimed so many maidens, lashed wildly, but it could strike no longer. Ada's heart raced, but she stood firm, remembering the seer's words. She could not falter. She could not hesitate. With every movement, Orji shrieked louder, his body writhing like a storm of shadow and scales. His skin split and reshaped itself, the man disappearing completely, replaced by a monstrous snake, enormous, black as midnight, glimmering under the moonlight. His eyes burned like fire, ancient and cruel, but the substance held him, stripped him of his power. Then, with a violent shake, he vanished into the darkness, leaving only the echo of his screams behind. Ada dropped to her knees, gasping, tears running freely, the weight of relief and exhaustion crashing down on her. She had faced death and lived. She had stopped the creature that had terrorized Ochu, and the village was free again. Morning came slowly, but when it arrived, Ochu seemed to breathe once more. The women and children emerged cautiously from their homes, eyes wide, hearts pounding, checking on their loved ones. Those who had survived hugged each other, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down their faces. The elders, once fearful and indecisive, finally recognized the courage that had saved the village. Ikenna found Ada kneeling by the calabash, and without a word embraced her tightly. No words could express the pride, the relief, the love, and the awe they felt. The village slowly returned to life, the laughter of children, the chopping of yams, the cooking fires, but it would never be the same. The story of the stranger, his deception, and the brave sister who confronted him would be remembered forever. Peace had returned to Ochu, but so had vigilance. The village had learned that evil sometimes wears the mask of beauty and innocence, and that courage, quick thinking, and love for your people were stronger than any spell or deception. Ada became a hero in silence, her name whispered with reverence, a reminder to all that even in the darkest night, one brave heart could bring dawn. Thank you for loving our stories, for staying till the end. Every view, comment, and share means the world to us. Stay tuned. The best stories are yet to come.